On this channel, I talk a lot about camera gear, but I don't say very much about how I use it. I use it to film this YouTube channel. I also have a secondary YouTube channel that's all about travel vlogging. And I'm also a professional photographer. I have been even before I started YouTube. So in this video, I want to talk more about how I got into photography and YouTube, and also offer you 6 tips on how you can get into a creative career or business of your own, if that's something that you want to do. So the first thing I would say is that you do not need a degree of any kind to get into media production, for the most part. I've been a freelance photographer again for over 10 years now, and never ever taken an actual photography class. I'm completely self-taught. My degree is actually in business. And yeah, everything I've learned about photography, I've learned through doing, by trial and error. If I've needed to look something up, I've watched YouTube tutorials, kind of like the ones that I make now. And so there's a lot of free resources out there for you to learn the skills of photography, videography, or content creation. I mean, content creation in particular. I don't think there's any school or degree, official school anyway, that will teach you that. So it's just something that you learn by doing and learn to do on your own. I will say though that the one exception to this rule is if you want to get an in-house position as like a corporate photographer or work for a big brand, do something that's not freelance. Then in that case, yes, you might need an actual degree or education in photography or videography. But again, if you're trying to be a self-employed freelancer, content creator, photographer, then you don't need to go to school for that. The next piece of advice that I have is to just start. If you wait for the best time or the stars to align for everything to be perfect, then you're going to be waiting a long time. When I first started photography, I actually started in music or concert photography. I was a writer for a music blog, not even vlog. And so I used to go to these shows and write reviews about them. And at some point, people were like, hey, you should add some photos to your written reviews. So I started in music photography, which if you know anything about it, it's one of the hardest forms of photography to start because you only get the first 3 songs of a concert. If that, sometimes it's 2 songs or 1 song. And you can't shoot with flash. So you're often shooting in really low light conditions. And so I just jumped into it head first. Didn't know the first thing about cameras or photography. I think I was shooting with a Nikon D40 back in the day. And yeah, I just was taking these photos, putting them up online. They were awful photos, if I'm honest. But I just started. I put myself out there, got a lot of feedback, and through that feedback and experience of doing and learning what I needed to work on, I was able to look up YouTube tutorials, talk to other photographers, learn how to improve my photography, and that is how I got started. Well, a typical Seattle fashion, it is pouring rain today, even though the forecast said it wasn't going to do that. But we're still making this video work. My next piece of advice is to find a way to make your content be educational or at least helpful to someone. Those early music photos that I was doing, they served to be like a news source so people could see what the concert was like and hear my thoughts about how the concert went. And even today, my main YouTube channel, the whole purpose is to review products so you guys know if it's worth spending your money on, as well as show you how to use those products. And so I try to be helpful through my content. The reality is that most of us are experts, or at least have skills in certain departments that we would consider ourselves to be experts in. And so try to share those skills and that expertise with your audience through your content. I'll give you an example. So if you look at my travel YouTube channel, it is a lot smaller than the tech channel, and it's a place where we still experiment with content. But we largely do personal travel vlogs, which I find to be more fun to shoot and to edit. But I also try to sprinkle in videos that are all about travel guides. So teaching people about a location and the things that they should do, or at least how to prepare for that upcoming trip. And you'll notice that if you look at those education-forward videos, that they do a lot better in terms of engagement. Basically, all the metrics are up with those videos compared to the fun travel vlogs. So I think it was Sarah Dietschy that once coined the term, one for them and one for you. So If you are starting out, make sure that you're making content that you are passionate about, but also make sure that some of that content is aimed at the algorithm or is educational or helpful to people in some way as well. Literally every time I've tried to film content this year, so far, I've been caught in a downpour. But anyway, my fourth piece of advice is to seek feedback on your work. Now, if you're publishing your work on social platforms, you'll probably be getting some feedback in the form of comments or maybe DMs from people. And hopefully they're nice comments. But it is good to take constructive criticism as well. And for that reason, when you are seeking feedback, you don't just want to ask your friends and family, because odds are they're just going to be overly nice. They're not going to be honest because they're your friends and family, unless you have brutally honest friends and family, which I don't, I would say. But for that reason, I would seek out other professionals in your field or someone who is doing something that you aspire to do. Reach out to them and actually pick a handful of them and reach out to them, because odds are not all of them are going to get back to you. So when I was first starting out and I knew I wanted to go the direction of professional photography, I was meeting concert photographers, and so I connected with them in person that way. But then I started to think, maybe I want to try wedding photography, but I knew nothing about it. So what I did is I Googled, Seattle wedding photographer, and looked at the portfolios, tried to pick out a few that I really admired and I wanted to learn more about the business. And so I emailed them. Only one got back to me out of, I think, the 10 that I emailed. So that's why I say cast a wide net, email a bunch of them. And there are a couple of things you could do. You could ask them, to go out to lunch or coffee to pick their brain. But I would say, that's a pretty big time commitment. So what I personally would do today, and what I'm more likely to respond to, is getting a message from someone asking me to critique their portfolio, or just to give them some general advice through email. I'm more likely to respond to that. And yeah, I actually think it would be a really fun way to help someone, or a helpful way to help someone. And so that's what I would do personally. Reach out to some people that are top performers or people that you aspire to be like and ask them to critique your work. You can also ask them out for coffee or lunch, but be sure to pay for it, number one. I made the mistake of not doing that the first time I did it. It was pretty awkward. And also, don't waste their time. Think of some thoughtful questions and try to keep it short and just be respectful of the time that they're willing to give you. The next piece of advice is probably controversial for some of you, but that is to do a limited amount of free work or work for exposure. So again, this is controversial because, some people believe, most of us actually, especially if we work in these media fields, believe that if you do free work, then you're driving down the average rates for those of us who do want to get paid for our work. And while I do agree with that, I would be a complete hypocrite if I said that I didn't do that to start my own career. The only way to really get work experience as a content creator, photographer, videographer, especially as a freelancer, is to do the work. There are very few apprenticeships anymore. It's really hard to get real-world exposure to these fields. And so when I first started, when I was doing those concert photos, I was doing it for free. I did a lot of free work to start with to get that exposure. But the thing with free work is that you do have to know the limit. You gotta know when to stop. So don't do free work forever, but be open to doing it to get your foot in the door. I've met so many people, did some great networking through that free work, so it is good from an exposure perspective as well. But again, just limit the amount of free work that you do, because it does drag the rest of us down if you do free work for too long. And my last piece of advice is don't quit your day job or dive deep into freelance or content creation work until you know that you're making enough money to survive. I worked a full-time 9-to-5 job for many years before I took the plunge to be a self-employed freelancer. And that was to get that work experience so that, if this freelance job of mine ever dries up, I know that I can return to the corporate world and have that work experience to be able to cut it in another type of job. but also to accumulate the savings or the funds to buy my camera equipment, because it's not cheap to get started. You've got to get started somehow. And so make sure that you're making enough money before you jump headfirst into a freelance or content creation career.